Valerie Penninan, Dr. Penninan, and I began this series of forums in 1914 when the association
2014.
in what 2014, not 1914, and I'm not that old, and although I'm old, 2014, and so this makes the 5th year that we've been doing this.
8th. 2014, 2018, would that be 8 or 4 years?
That would be
14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That's
4
fine.
years.
5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
5 years.
I'm not good at math.
Yeah. We can count.
It was more
Maybe.
than 5 figures I've ever heard.
So, and so we're learning some of the cultural and some of the environmental history of the area. And so before we get started, I want to ask if anyone has any announcements of upcoming events that they want to share. If not, you can, when you signed in at the table, there were some things, items, documents that were left over from Friday's meeting. The second annual Wolf Lake Watershed Advisory Committee meeting held Friday, November 2nd. And I'm going to be talking about some of the highlights of that meeting. And it's from my perspective, so it's what I got out of the meeting. And as kind of an organizer of the meeting, I can't take the best notes. So I don't think anyone here was at the meeting. Cynthia might be here later on, and she was at the meeting, so she might correct me on any errors I make. But I don't want to get into a PowerPoint immediately. I want to show you how artistic I am.
Marker's almost dry, Michael.
I know, I have to get a new marker. It's election day and the marker should work. So, Dr. Phil Willink, who worked for many years at the Field Museum and then for many years after that at the Shed Aquarium, where he was senior researcher. And currently he's doing consulting work, I believe. He's a member of our board of directors. So, but his talk was generated a lot of interest at the meeting. We had a long Q&A after his talk, and so I would like to start with his discussion and his presentation, and then I'll have a PowerPoint, and we'll go on to some of the other topics that were discussed, because there was 5 or 6 that I found very important, very interesting, and that's why I go to that meeting, is to find out what's going on in the Wolf Lake watershed, because you can't keep up with it. And with all these different agencies doing their own thing, they know what they're doing, but they don't stop to tell me. And so that's one of the reasons why we have the meeting. But Dr. Phil Willink in 2009 had published an article on more than a century of history of fish at Wolf Lake. And it's amazing that they started collecting data in the late 1800s and would continue off and on through the 20th century. And so they have a pretty good record of what fish were there at what time. And but he described Wolf Lake as an exaggerated swale. From the Dune and Swale, Ridge and Swale, or whatever you call it. And so this is Ridge and Swale. and this is Lake Michigan. So, in the last exaggerated swell, or the most recent one, say, at any time during the retreating of the glaciers, the nearest, the lakes in the nearest swell will pretty much have open water. The one earlier, by this time, will actually be a little bit lower. It would be less depth, and it would be, you might describe it as a wetland instead of a lake. And the one previous to that would probably be mostly filled up by then and would be turning into a meadow or a field of some sort. And so this is a succession of at least glacial lakes. And when in the late 1800s, Wolf Lake was like this. It was a wetland. They did a survey there because the owner was contemplating building a harbor there, which of course did not happen. And the harbor came in a little bit further east of that. And by the way, he owned that property as well. So, but anyway, when the federal government came in to determine whether this would be a good place for a harbor or not, found out that the average depth of Wolf Lake in 1895 was 2.5 feet. The average depth of Wolf Lake in 1895 was 2.5 feet. The deepest part was 4 feet, around 4 feet. So, and in his specialty on fish, that would be favorable to some fish and not to others, that condition. But Wolf Lake now actually is back to this. And why? Primarily because of man started dredging it. And today, the average depth of Wolf Lake is 8.5 feet. The deepest pockets are around 17, 18 feet. Some say that it's deeper than that, but let's leave it at that. So, and so he said that fish have changed over the years because of the deepening of Wolf Lake, but also because of invasive fish and other aquatic animals. And they somewhat control which fish survive and which do not. So, enough of my artwork. Oh, you know what? Okay. I'm going to ask Mary to help me a little bit tonight because this is difficult to read. My intern of a year ago designed this. I didn't. I don't take any credit for it, but he did. And the last time I showed something like this, people found it difficult to read. So as we go along, Mary will read all of them for me. Well, let's do it this way. If anybody has difficulty reading it as we go along, we'll just have it read. Is that fairly readable
Yeah.
to everybody? Okay.
Not for me, but that's usual.
Okay, well,
Don't worry.
Mary will read it.
I
Okay,
practice.
It's, my situation is different.
Okay.
so.
good. Mary, why don't you-
Okay, what is the Wolf Lake Watershed Advisory Committee? Proposed years ago in the Wolf Lake Vision document, which resulted from discussions at the 2000-2001 bi-state gatherings on Wolf Lake. It brings together community stakeholders, state and regional planners, property managers, and public agencies to discuss projects at the Wolf Lake Watershed. It will build upon the research discussed at the 2016 Research Summit and update plans and proposals discussed in 2017 to turn these ideas into action, and will incorporate input from local communities, including residents on both sides of the state line.
Now, everyone's familiar with how it works. With the aerial of the watershed, this is Wolf Lake, George Lake, Powderhorn Lake and Prairie, and some things that we can't see. So I'm going to go to a map, and on this map is Indian Creek that runs up here. And that's going to be the central topic in Friday's discussion. And you have Calumet Container, this triangular piece of 11.5 acres there. That will come into discussion as well. And I just wanted to point those two spots out. Wow, okay. This is, we were talking earlier about the succession of lakes, and Dr. Willink referred to Wolf Lake as a large swale, exaggerated swale. Well, in that exaggerated swale were other lakes. George Lake,
So this is Deer Lake.
what's that, Deer Lake?
Looks
Or
like Deer Lake.
actually, it's also Berry Lake. And I think Berry were the family that lived at the, where Lake Michigan enters the Calumet River. And I think the Berries owned, and I think it's probably named for them, but I'm not sure. But they were the ones that helped folks traveling along Wolf Lake, along Lake Michigan to cross the Calumet River and then onto South Chicago and other parts of Chicago. And I think the family was the Berries. And I think that's why it was named Berry Lake. And I'm not familiar with the deer. And this one is Hyde Lake. And so it's interesting that man came in and kind of filled in Hyde Lake and Berry Lake or Deer Lake, but did some excavation and has allowed Wolf Lake and George Lake to continue as lakes. George Lake is really a wetland, except for the southern portion, which they've dredged and is definitely a lake.
Mike, what year was that map?
You know, I was trying to think. I'm thinking it's around 1900 because I don't know when, because Deer Lake was Standard Oil when they built, I think, and that's when they filled in Deer Lake or Berry Lake. And Hyde Lake was kind of filled in the 30s, maybe the 20s. John, you should know that.
Oh,
What would you say?
I'm thinking maybe later, because, well, I don't know, but the marsh in the southeast corner of
Yeah.
Eggers Grove,
Yeah.
I thought that was part of Wolf Lake at one time, and at least had some kind of connection. It doesn't show it there, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's, but it's obviously, it's a forest preserve, Cook County Forest Preserve, so it's on this side of the state line. And the Nike site, Nike missile site, and the Nike missile site, and also the slag fill from Republic Steel.
Yeah.
Cut that off from Wolf Lake, so I don't know how.
Okay.
It was connected at one time, you know?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah, I'm
might-
sure it was all
that-
connected.
It might have been marsh, it might have been just connected by a marsh, it might not,
Yeah.
not have actually been a
And then you have Lake Calumet up here, which was, man intervened in that as well, and dredged that even more than these other lakes have been dredged.
Yeah, and I had heard that basically you had to go down to, you had to, in order to get around Lake Michigan, you almost had to go down all the way to farther south of that, because there was so many wetlands and stuff, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know when they actually built those roads, you know?
Yeah, well, in 1803, the Lieutenant Swearington, just rode his folks right along Lake Michigan, right along the shoreline, and to get to Chicago. And a lot of the earlier settlers drove their wagons along that same route. But there are others that, of course, went further south and went along the other.
That you had to go down to higher ground, like Michigan City Road is.
Yeah.
In Cal City.
Yeah.
And stuff, and if you had.
Exactly. So,
that part.
this is kind of important because we were talking about Dune and Swale earlier, and here's these striations here are Dune and Swale, and it's just next to Powderhorn Lake and Prairie, and that's it.
Well, Powderhorn was dug out for the sand for the sand for the interstate.
Could you read that?
Highways.
Yeah. Dune and swale topography can clearly be seen in this 1938 aerial photograph. The striations run from northwest to southeast, north and south of the Grand Calumet River, near Chicago's Hegewisch neighborhood in Burnham, Illinois. Powderhorn Lake and Prairie is at the northeast section. And the photos from the Southeast Chicago Historical Museum.
And Lake Succession, once you read that.
Ponds closer to Lake Michigan were younger, contained more open water, less vegetation and debris, and more species of fishes. Ponds farther from Lake Michigan were older, contained less open water, more vegetation and debris, and fewer species of fishes. In short, these ponds were slowly filling in over time, converting to marshes. Wolf Lake was on a similar succession trajectory. Originally an open bay of Lake Michigan, it began to slowly lose its connection with the lake. Vegetation and debris were gradually filling its basin. It was surrounded by encroaching marsh. In time, Wolf Lake would have completely disappeared, gradually changing into field and later to forest. This succession was interrupted as people colonized the area and modified the environment. Vegetation was removed and banks were stabilized. The lake bottom was dredged. Wolf Lake was essentially reset to an earlier time, according to Dr. Phil Willink of the Shed Aquarium in a 2009 article. Ridges along Lake Michigan's basin formed lanes of transportation by foot for animal and man, wagons, trains, and today's autos.
Now, one of the things that he noted, or that was mentioned at the meeting, was Indian Creek, and This is a project that was addressed last year, and I'm going to get the last year's final report. And I kind of want to read a section that was given by Dave Graham with the Chicago Health Department on the conditions at Indian Creek. And this is the Shroud property along that. What's our next slide? This is what we'll get into later on. But I want to read from the report that Dave Graham, Assistant Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, said the city of Chicago has known since 1999 that there is hazardous waste on the 70-acre site near Indian Creek, bought by developer Donald Shroud. Graham said he has not seen the specific results of the sampling done a long time ago, but a recent study by the Illinois EPA confirmed that there are contaminants including lead, chromium, zinc, and manganese. Manganese is not at removal levels, but is very high. Manganese has been associated with neurological problems like Parkinson's disease and might become a major contributor in the area if the contaminants are not handled properly. Another sampling on the site was planned for November of 2017. I think it's 2017. The site may be evaluated for Superfund eligibility. People are interested in the site for the potential to recycle slag. The site is a playground for people in the area. Unfortunately, they are poisoning themselves by being around these contaminants. The city and environmental groups discuss ways of keeping people off the site. And the city has plans to put up signage. I don't think they have yet, but they were planning to have it up by now. And Jersey barriers, but stronger fencing on the site is not an option, he said. Graham said the city of Chicago has had a very difficult time dealing with Donald Shroud. The city has sued Shroud, but has never seen any of that money. The Shroud still owes millions. Graham said Shroud was forced to put the site into the voluntary remediation program, but later he was kicked out of the program. And he's had made promises that previously on more than one occasion and has never lived up to his promises, and now I don't think he has any money to compensate people. And no one wants to, I mean, he could sell the property for $1, but who would want to buy it? And so that's one of the problems that he pointed out. That was a year ago. This year, Doris Anderson from Open Lands gave a really interesting talk in which he said that this is Indian Creek. These are all the sample sites for actually a study done in was published in early 2017, but done in 2016 by the Illinois EPA. That was the study that Graham referred to, and it came up with a list of the same contaminants that Dave Graham mentioned in his talk. But in this area particularly, Durr says that that there are the word repressed areas that were 1 to 3 feet lower than the rest of the ground. And he says it's causing a problem because when we have heavy rains, instead of the water rolling or moving into Indian Creek on the surface, that it instead has nowhere to go but down. And once it gets down, then it's mixed with the contaminants that are in the soil, and then it moves underground to Indian Creek. So Indian Creek, and so it points to a hydrology problem at Indian Creek that, for example, will have to be solved before we make a Section 319 grant for a bi-state grant for Wolf Lake or a bi-state management plan. He said people are going to have to figure, or we're going to have to figure out, someone's going to have to figure out have to gain an understanding of the hydrology in this area. And let's see. He also mentioned that at the end of Carondelet and 126th Street, close to the bridge by the ball field in Hegewisch, they found some material coming out of the soil, oozing out, and I just can't remember exactly how they identified this, the type of what is leaking. But the US EPA, Burnett Simon is the project manager of that soon, and we go back several years to Calumet container site, so she worked on that as well. I'm going to try to figure out what is happening there.
Did you say that it was coming out of the baseball field?
It's come near the bridge that would be north of the Babe Ruth field or the Little League field.
Okay. I didn't know if the kids were playing on the fields with the stuff seeping out of the ground.
No, that would have been another situation. But it is coming out near there, and so there is concern. And I just can't remember what they said, but it was bad enough for the US EPA to become involved. So some of you do live in Hegewisch or near Hegewisch, and so that should be a concern. But if you do, you should also be familiar with the site inspection done in 2017 on the Shroud property by the Illinois EPA. And in fact, that would be actually in the Hyde Lake wetland, what we described as the Hyde Lake wetland area. So, and I believe that's now owned by the city of Chicago. So I think they're dealing with whatever is coming out of that area. Okay, and another issue that came up was Calumet container. And why don't you read, Mary, what that?
Okay, the goals of the project are to restore Calumet Container 11-acre brownfield as a natural area to serve as an outdoor classroom for area school children, to restore Calumet Container to wetland and prairie status, and to establish agreement on future management. The status right now is meetings with property owners and stakeholders are ongoing by Calumet Collaborative. NIPSCO is the new owner of the 4-acre north section along 136th Street with the addition of a pumping station, and the city of Hammond is the new owner of the 4-acre south section.
So, and the change in ownership both occurred within the past year. So, so the folks that we're dealing with at the table will include NIPSCO and city of Hammond. And the Calumet Collaborative has taken over, at least on this effort of coming up with a solution to Calumet container. And that's been ongoing since the early 2000s, the effort for that area.
You couldn't get across the road today because of the construction.
Yeah, and that was going to be closed for, do you know how long that's going to be closed for? I think maybe a couple weeks or so. I don't know.
Construction across from the bank building, or
The Calumet container directly east of the railroad tracks on 134th.
Yeah.
So is that right off Boy Scout Road?
Yeah, it's right along Boy Scout Road, and I know one of the things they're putting in a pipe, I think they're from Hagwood, that comes through and is crossing the road, and so I think that's one of the reasons for the delay. But yeah, I haven't been able to get across drive there. It's been blocked off for at least a week, maybe longer. And I just love this pond. This is on the northeast section of Calumet Container. But when NIPSCO bought it, one of the sacrifices was that they were going to fill in this pond. So I believe it's been filled in already. And I'm sorry to see that go. Okay, another item is Save the Mud Puppy campaign. Could you read that?
The goals of the project are to post notices for those fishing in Wolf Lake and Powderhorn Lake to return mud puppies to the water and to prompt more education about mud puppies. The status is the Shed Aquarium is researching the causes of mud puppy population decline in the Great Lakes. A major cause is fishers not knowing mud puppies are fully aquatic and should not be left on the ice and shoreline. ArcelorMittal recently gave funding for some posters to inform fishers of mud puppies' importance to the ecosystem and the need to return captured mud puppies to the water.
And the current research that was reported by Jared Belock was the what happened to mud puppies when it reached the warmer months, summer months, late spring and early fall, because they are very active and very present when it's cold and when people are ice fishing, but no one really knows what happens to them during the summer months. And so Jared has been out the past year trying to track down where they are during the summer months and how far they move. And I think the range was probably the farthest a mud puppy traveled during the summer months was about 100 meters, 110 meters, something like that. And but the normal travel is usually around 30 meters or so. And that's my recollection of the figures given. That they may be slightly different than that. But that is part of the reporting over the past year. And the study will continue for at least another year. And I just haven't talked to, and Phil Willink, Dr. Willink is still in charge of that research, even though he's no longer with Shed Aquarium. But we'll just stay tuned for that. But as the decline of population stretches all across the Great Lakes, and they're trying to figure out exactly why that's happening. And I don't know if they've had the complete answer yet.
Do you know what they,
Changing habitat.
do you know what they eat?
They eat anything they can get in their mouths. And so, the larger the mouth, the larger, but they'll eat anything. And I guess any, fish large enough to take them on will prey on them. And research is going on on Lake Michigan, other areas of Lake Michigan, but they are fairly numerous at Wolf Lake, and so that's one of the reasons why part of the study is being done there. And there's a mud puppy. I think the largest they get is maybe 18 inches, but and they're have these colorful gills that makes them rather kind of attractive, don't you think? But anyway, maybe other mud puppies think so. I'm not sure. And this is not Jared Bielak, but this is the first person doing research. He's a graduate student at Southern Illinois University, and she's now working in somewhere in, I think, Detroit, because I've been in contact with her lately. But Jared is working on his doctorate, and I asked him when is he going to get it, and he said maybe a year or so off. So, and he's working on his dissertation now, I think. Oh, this brings us back to Phil Willing. This slide is really out of place, but I think this just repeats what I said earlier. Okay, this is another project that I'm really interested in, and I've got time to talk about it. Which is it's actually the reconnecting of Wolf Lake to Powderhorn Lake, and it's along pretty much the Avenue K in Haguish, and they just why don't you read that and bring up the status?
The status is that the connection will be made along a route just east of Chicago's Avenue K, and the property has been purchased. And this is the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. And remember back it was 2003 when the Forest Preserve, or when the what's the national group, Forest
Service.
The Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, did a stat projection. Okay, I think I have it. Yeah, this is it. It's a photo simulation of would be 134th Street, and of what would be needed in case they made the reconnection through that, and then the Avenue K channel would be just straight north of that. And I don't think they came up with the time when the construction would begin on it. But it would be the Cook County Forest Preserve District, and you could check with them to see what the timetable is. And so this, these are old studies, and now they're back in fashion. Whether it'll ever need a bridge or not, I don't know. But anyway, this is a way to get discussion going on what the connection would be like.
Isn't there some private land between? No. The trailer courts don't extend all the way to
That property has been purchased.
Oh, okay. So there's still some trailers there, right? No? No? They're all gone now?
All gone. So, anyway, I like this aerial view of Powderhorn and then Wolf Lake and then Lake Michigan. And remember this?
Yeah.
It's now gone, of course. And we're not going to discuss this because we think that Section 319 is a little bit early and more study needs to be done on the hydrology. Now, Indian Creek is it's about a mile long, right? And about a third of it is owned by the city of Chicago, and they've restored it. And it doesn't look as nice as this, but it's similar today. But the 2/3 is still owned by Don Trout, the developer, and I don't know who's going to end up with it, but we hopefully will figure out a way to get it cleaned up and then into public hands. And could you read?
Extending hiking, biking trails in the bi-state watershed area. The project is to create a bike trail along Boy Scout Drive, 134th Street, to extend to the state line. Hammond has plans to extend this trail further to complete the circle of trails around Wolf Lake. The status is engineered but not funded. They'd like to build an overpass over the Norfolk Southern and South Shore Railroad tracks at Brainerd and Burnham Avenues. The status is hopefully agreement reached by early 2019 with the Village of Burnham, railroad companies, and other agencies.
So there's actually two kind of projects that we're thinking of. The one along 134th and then 136th Streets is, as we said, some of that's been engineered. The city of Hammond at one point was thinking about closing 136th Street to just bicycle traffic, put a bike trail there instead of the street. And I assume that's because the street is just difficult to maintain over the years. But I have not, that is only an idea, and I couldn't get anyone to say that's still being considered. But I know the city of Hammond is planning on extending that trail around the rest of the lake. Just how it gets there, the location of it is, I don't think is final. But Durs Anderson is the person who is involved in that, and he's the one that I look to for updates on it. And Mitch Barloga was also there, and he does the hike and bike trails in northwest Indiana, the 3-county area. And he discussed, I don't think he had any new news on northwest, on Wolf Lake connections. I think they've been established. And this is, this discussion was held in the afternoon. It was on recreation, and we wanted some local residents that were active on the watershed to talk about their activity. And Dave Dabberton was there to talk about ice boating, sailing, and swimming activities that he's involved in. Dr. Chris was there to talk about her rowing team from Calumet College, and because they practice on Wolf Lake, and they're headquartered at the Ileana Yacht Club. But she hasn't. What she wants to do is to come up with a rowers from the community, members of the community that would like to get into maybe competitive rowing. And so I actually talked to her today, and I said, "Do you have anyone want to do that?" And she hasn't. She did said she didn't have. But I told her that I would repeat her invitation to those of you here, and if you wanted to try out for the rowing group,
Send us
you're
flyers.
welcome to that.
Send us flyers.
Okay.
Flyers, we'll have her
Yeah.
send flyers.
Okay, I'll do that. What else should I do? I mean, I'll have her do it. I'm not going to do it.
Right, right.
Yeah, but it's an idea, and I'll get some information to you.
Good.
That's a good idea. So, are there any questions on our meeting on the Wolf Lake Watershed
So,
Friday? Yeah.
so during your meeting, even though I know that most of what you were talking about does directly relate to the heritage of the area, it seems to me that the heritage seems to be based in the physical landscape that is surrounding us, such as the watersheds. But is there anything directly related to present-day industrial events that are having an impact on our heritage, other than, of course, the landfills and the potential?
Contaminants
Yeah.
that accompany that. That it's a good part of our heritage.
Yeah. No.
Isn't it? And I'm trying to think now. There are others here that should.
The pet coke thing that we had to battle with the cross-border stuff against
BP to.
the Koch brothers and stuff like that. We were successful with that one, but there's a lot still. We've got the manganese issue now. So.
Yeah, and not only from 102nd and whatever street that is
The river
on the east side, yeah, and the river.
Amazing.
But also at Indian Creek.
On Mazo, I always smell in the summertime, lots of times when the wind is coming from the southeast, I smell like chlorine smell, like chlorine bleach. I don't know. I think they make corn syrup. It used to be called the Mazo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then now it's Cargill. It's right south of 112th Street on the Indiana side
Oh,
of the state
okay.
line. And I don't know what. Maybe they clean out the vats with chlorine or something.
Well, I would think that might actually come from maybe
Well, I live
from the chemical company there.
What? That's farther south, isn't it?
It's farther
On-
south.
On the other side of Wolf Lake?
No, that's another chemical plant. But the one I'm talking about is I can't remember the name of it. It used to be called. But that you might be able to get something through the air from them as well, because they're at about 138
Yeah, that's farther
south.
farther south than
Okay.
if the one was coming from the southeast,
Yeah.
that would blow more towards Cypress.
Yeah, on the east side,
The
yeah.
old Kyle Chemical on 138 and Kyle. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to smell that at 107th.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Yeah, it could be.
so.
It could be. I know Cargill was really bad in the early 2003, 2004, and before that, and they cleaned up fairly well by 2005, 2006, and so they and so you don't have that sulfur smell that, around anymore, but.
What I smell is like a chlorine smell.
It's a chlorine, huh? Okay, that's interesting to know. Because there was they've just applied for a permit, and, but I hadn't heard anything about them, so I didn't contest their permit application, but maybe we should keep an eye on that, and I'll check around and see what others are saying.
Michael, in the time that you've been working with, which is pretty extensive, on both sides, but working with the issues of corporate pollution and then corporate cleanup, have you, over the years, detected changes in attitudes within the corporations themselves about the importance of this? Or are they doing it always at the point of a gun?
Some of them, I think all corporations do it at the point of the gun. But some of them do it, I guess, more willingly than others, particularly if they have the money to improve, to make the improvements necessary. Like, as you know, we've been struggling with Wolf Lake terminals for the past 5 years, and actually probably for the last 30 years, because if you look at it in 1992, they were having problems with the US EPA. So, and they've had a history of problems, so they don't want to change. And remember in 2014, in April, when US EPA, Illinois EPA, and Indiana Department of Environmental Management swept down and did their inspection and found, each one of them found a lot of violations. And at the end of 2014, US EPA was just about ready to sue them. I think, and then there was a change in administration in Springfield, and that never came about. But that is still a possibility, and US EPA could be invited back to see how well they cleaned up. Because out of that, Wolf Lake Terminals had a 5-year plan in which at the end of the 5 years they'll have everything up to snuff. It's been that now, so it's probably time to check them and see how well they have been. I mean, our efforts have made improvements in the permit, but not improvements that we find adequate. So, but there's nothing in the courts right now.
I asked the question because we were, perhaps 15 years ago, went to a 2-day seminar program in Monroe, Michigan at the IHM Mother House in Monroe, Michigan, which was a major rehab, environmental rehab. And they did fantastic things there to the tune of tens of millions of dollars of rehab. But the instructors who were explaining all this stuff to us for 2 days were the original villains. They were the contractors who had always said, environmental stuff sounds good, but it's garbage. We want to get on and get, we can't afford it. They were the ones who said, that's how we started. And then we found out, yes, we can do it and we can make profits too. And not only that, we can do it and feel good about the profits we're making. And they were really, they were the new ministers.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, has any of that crept into the industry itself? And I gather from what you're saying, not much.
No, I think it has. I think some companies are easier to deal with and are fairly open to what's going on.
That's encouraging.
And they tell me when I press too hard. And so then if it's not worth, then you just don't press any further. But you can talk to them, and I've always been the one to push for dialogue with with businesses. We have 40 companies within the Wolf Lake watershed. 40 companies that are benefiting, at least their employees are benefiting from the watershed. That's where they go fishing. That's where they go. You know, they do their things, windsurfing, maybe, biking. I had a president of a company for motor manufacturing center, and he used to bike all over, and he would bike to work from, I think he lived in Cherville or someplace like that. But so people use it. I don't have a problem at all saying, well, hey, your employees are benefiting from the watershed. How about paying some attention to it? And so I don't have a problem talking to them at all. And Dennis has a question.
So have the berms and the slag that was been dumped into Wolf Lake been tested by the EPA for contaminants?
Yeah, the slag around Wolf Lake, I think, has pretty much leached out everything that was in it. The problem with Indian Creek is the slag over there has not been, and it's still leaching out, and water is still carrying it into Indian Creek. In fact, I was going to mention, there's a quote here about what happens to fish with and aquatic plants. But you can imagine that stuff is going in. And I also want to bring up something that I forgot during our discussion on the fish population at Wolf Lake. And then I think things also came up in discussions on Indian Creek is the level of Lake Michigan. Because right now Lake Michigan is high, and when Lake Michigan is high, sometimes it reverses the flow from the Chicago River, and when it does that, then the water backs up into Indian Creek, and all the contaminants that were going into Lake Michigan, into our drinking water, actually backs up into Wolf Lake and causes problems there. And so the discussion, I said, well, what's the projections for level of Lake Michigan? Because for years there was a fairly constant lowering and rising of the lake level. But they say now that the Lake Michigan will be approaching both its historic highs and its historic lows. So the variation in level is going to be drastic one way and the other way as well. And so that's not a very good
It's pumping junk both ways.
message. Pardon?
It's pumping junk both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
The water usage and varying levels of the lake is much more complicated than just that. We have big industrial users on the lake that routinely and that are pulling water on out, particularly brokers and cargo. In addition, we also have sort of a understanding with the state of Illinois as far as the release of water from Indian Creek into Lake Calumet. At the terminus, western terminus of the Indian Creek is a lock,
Yeah.
and that controls the water level. And we have had, really varying levels. Within a year, it's not uncommon to see an 18-inch fluctuation, which is pretty darn big in
Yeah.
that. So, this is one of the things, supposedly these things are governed. And they're, and nobody denies, Cargill really doesn't take out as much water as it's a rolling type thing that they use for coolant.
Yeah.
So they're replacing this at times, that I've also heard that cargo actually adds to the amount of water, because they're also pulling water from the Lake Michigan side, the aquifer, and then they're returning it in Wolf Lake.
Actually, that's Lever Brothers is doing that. Lever
Okay.
Brothers is taking in water from Lake Michigan, using it as coolant, and then they have ponds just west of the building.
And just north of Indianapolis there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
But, no.
that eventually flows into Wolf Lake.
You do also have that type of discharge exchange within the cargo, because you can go by, through Forsyth Park there and actually see the water spout come up right
Yeah.
next to the cargo building. So, I mean, I don't think that's Lever Brothers. I'm pretty darn sure that's cargo.
Most of the water that Cargill takes in does go back to Lake Michigan. What Cargill has is the runoff when it rains, right? And that goes into Wolf Lake. But I think that they're supposed to be returning the intake back to Lake Michigan. That's what I've been told. And the water that is, and there are 3 pumps there. There are 2 pumps close to Indianapolis Boulevard on either side of the water there, one east and one west, I think. And then there's one closer to the
Indianapolis. There's
south
one
of that.
sitting right at Indianapolis
Right.
there at the bridge.
Yeah.
That's
That's
very suspicious. If you go through, now of course you can't do that because the marina is shutting off the park at dusk, with the
Yeah.
gates. But you used to be able to drive through the drive there in Forsyth Park, and the water discharge, it looked like a geyser coming out of
Is
the
that
floor
right?
channel there. It was like, wow, like that.
Yeah.
And this always took place somewhere between 10:30 and midnight.
Okay.
They never do it.
What years are you talking about?
That's probably about, about 12, 13 years ago. The drive, through Forsyth Park is in its
Yeah.
present configuration.
Yeah.
But they hadn't, the gates were there, but I don't think they were, diligently locking.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Let me take another look at that and see what I found. Are there other questions?
Yeah, I got one. Are you familiar with the Forest Preserve at Edwards Grove? The Forest Preserve District is going to be digging pipes to where there's ditches.
Okay.
I guess there were some. There are some like that they can. There's the ditches like south of 112th Street, and then the water goes into there instead of Wolf Lake, like it probably used to, because of the slag fill from Republic Steel
Yeah.
and Nike missile site, So they're going to be. I don't know how much that's going to cost. They're supposed to start. I think they were maybe going to do it this year, but maybe they didn't have the money. I don't know, but maybe they're going to start this spring or something. But they've already kind of cleared out a little spot where one of the pipes is going to go. But I think that's kind of silly.
Is that
to
diverting,
take.
with the intent of diverting water back into Wolf Lake?
No,
Oh, what?
goes into the sewers.
Oh,
They're trying to create a handy marsh.
No,
Okay,
no.
For the birds.
They're going. These they're having a problem with trees dying and stuff like that because of the high water levels. That.
As part of their draining the lake to create a hemi marsh, it may be partly because of the trees, but it's mostly because of the birds.
Yeah.
To create more suitable habitat there for the birds.
I wasn't told anything about that.
I
Talked
think,
to some of the
Dan
people.
Spence.
I think
talked to
Matt Miller,
That's
Matt Miller is in charge of that, and I think, she's probably right, I think that's probably part of what he's doing.
But the
we
water,
discussed-
but this is clean water that falls on a forest preserve, and that's gone into the sewers.
Yeah,
So that doesn't make sense to me, you know?
well, no, that's why this was discussed at the meeting a little bit. Can't think of her last name, Rebecca, remember her last name? But she was from the Forest Preserve District, and
Moss?
we were talking about options to having the water drain into the Chicago sewer system.
Rebecca Moss?
No, it's another Collins, I think, Rebecca Collins. And so she said that they couldn't come up with a feasible option that wasn't too expensive, because I think no one really likes the idea of the water flowing into the sewer system. But and they were considering diverting it along the, I may not get this exactly right, but diverting it so it would flow along the ditch near the Burnham Greenway, and figure out how to get it back into Wolf Lake using that route. I think maybe an easier route might be through northwest to Indiana,
Yeah.
but that involves two different agencies, and
Yeah, to me that would be a shorter.
but I
route.
think it would be a shorter route, and I'm going to email her and just mention to it. But I think
Well, it doesn't
agencies
make
don't
sense.
like to work with people.
You're complaining about the companies dumping water into Wolf Lake, and now you're trying to dump more water into Wolf Lake.
No.
The natural flow from Acres Woods.
That would be clean water.
That's
clean
not,
rainwater.
that's not clean water, it's water that's gone through slag heaps. There's slag all over there at Nike.
No,
It's not clean,
no, we don't want. We wouldn't send it to the Nike missile site. To the Nike
that's
missile
where it
site.
comes from.
No, I would like to say. No. This is stuff that it's the swale, the ridge swale topography, and there's a big marsh that used to be all cattails when I was a kid in the southeast corner of Everett Grove, and that at one time was connected, but it's blocked off by the slag flow. Southwest, that's about 118th Street, where the slag flow starts, and then
And it runs up along the east side.
A lot, yeah. Where in Indiana, when they built the tollway, they filled it, But why would there's so much slag already and that's been there for it's been there for a long time now. I'm thinking that most of the real toxic stuff has probably already been leached out of there, I don't know that for sure. I'm not a scientist, But what I'm thinking is that clean rainwater, when it falls into these swales and also into the marsh, that's clean water, and that when you do have a real heavy rain, like like a 2 or 3 inches in an hour or two, that's when people's basements flood and stuff like that, So I was just thinking that maybe there's a better way to handle it by sending it through to the north end of Wolf Lake, the part that comes up through on the Indiana side.
If you want to prevent basement flooding, that's what sewers are for.
Yeah. Well, sending more rainwater from the forest preserve into the community sewers wouldn't make too much sense to me,
Makes good sense, that's what they're doing all over. That's how you avoid flooding.
How avoid people would rather have the forest preserve a little, a little muddier than, than having their basements flooded, But what I'm saying is that, well, to me, it doesn't make that much sense putting, water that falls on a clean environment, rainwater that falls on a relatively clean environment to go into the sewer system. Now, that's my opinion, yeah?
Okay. Well, are there any other questions?
I don't know if there's anything we could do about it. But,
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming. And for those that didn't sign up, please sign up so we can mark your presence. And there are also handouts here. And one of them is from NERC, the Green Waste and Blue Waste. I assume this is Northwest Indiana. There's also a 2-page history of windsurfing at Wolf Lake, and this was written by Jackie Butson, who used to have the contract with the city of Hammond to teach windsurfing. And so she'd been there for about 20 years, and I wanted her to come to the conference Friday, but she says, no, I'm not going to be in Hawaii. And she's about my age, so she's out doing her thing in Hawaii. And but she says, so I said, well, if you can't come, can you write something up about your time as an instructor? And so she wrote these 2 pages, single space. And it's just an interesting read. So I would suggest that. We also had a speaker that came in at and gave a talk at 1 o'clock on algae. And he has left some information here on blue-green algae bloom. And it hasn't affected anything in the watershed yet, thank God, but it has affected other lakes in the Chicago region, north and west of Chicago. So that we have information on that as well, and some information on Calumet Collaborative. So you might want to pick those up on your way out. And I'm just reminded that today we received in the mail a $1,900 grant from Indiana Humanities to fund Calumet Revisited for this past year. And we've applied and been accepted for next year as well. But we won't get the money until late summer.
Deserves an applause right there, Mike.
Yes, and so we have, that's right, we have money now to pay stipend to the speakers. And who's tonight's speaker?
The treasurer.
So,
Are you running for office, Michael?
with that kind of money, I probably
That's what I'm
would
thinking.
consider it, yes. But we'll see. And now I want every one of you to go home and watch the news.
Yeah,
To see
it's very
to see
interesting.
who's winning and who's losing. And you know what? I think we've got a little smaller audience this time because it's on voting day, but I don't think has affected the attendance that much. So if we next November, if the first Tuesday falls on the first Tuesday of the month, then we'll just have it.
Michael, did you want to say something about the next event?
Oh, yes, we have in front of me the Greening of the Arts. Our fourth concert is coming up. We have a series of 5 concerts, and so Friday night at 7 p.m. we'll have Dave Dolak in concert, and he plays classic jazz, and pop music, and some folk songs of the region. on acoustic guitar and hurdy-gurdy. He's a professor at Columbia College. I keep saying Calumet College. I don't know why I keep saying this. But anyway, Columbia College on instrument making. So he makes his students make guitars, violins, and he's also a geologist. So that's what he teaches primarily.
What about December, Calumet Revisited?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Next month is December
Right,
4th.
yes.
And we're going to have a panel discussing a
Digital libraries, isn't it? Digital
museum
museum, that was it, yeah.
for the Calumet region. And there are a lot of ideas that are being pursued right now through the Field Museum. And so we'll be talking about that. And I'm glad you brought it up, Kevin, because you're on that panel, aren't you? So,
Pat Wisniewski?
Pat Wisniewski, and Dr. Larry McClellan, and Mike
Longan.
Longan.
Chirp from Calumet
Calumet
Heritage Partnership, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to have about a 20-minute introduction by Madeline Tudor for the Field Museum. And so that will set the stage for what happens after that. But they're having a lot of meetings. In fact, they're having one tonight, or did I miss it? But anyway.
We both missed it, it's tonight.
Yeah, it's tonight. It's in Gary. But they're having these meetings regularly where they're bringing all the library and museum
You mean the
folks
Calumet
together.
collaborators that I was at yesterday?
Curators.
Okay.
Yesterday.
Calumet curators. sorry.
Curators, yes. That was
I-
yesterday.
Yeah, that was yesterday.
Our next one, the one that's going to be next one is in Pullman, and that's only for group one. There's different groups for each site that is being used as an exhibition area. So there's one that's going to be in Gary, and I don't remember when that one's going to be, but they have them in, there's one for Gary, there's one for Valparaiso, and there's one for Pullman. And the one for Pullman just happened, is going to be happening this Thursday at the Historic Pullman Foundation Center at 1:30 to 3:30.
Yeah, that's one.
That one, we're just discussing about the museum exhibit that we're going to be putting there. And yeah,
So what happened in Gary?
Gary, we toured the archives that they have there, looked at some rather interesting books that we could potentially use for sources, saw the space that we're going to use for the exhibit, and talked about programming and activities that are going to be maybe used.
How large a group did you have?
We had about 10 people there, and it was, I think it was very productive.
Okay.
I think that's the word, yeah, productive.
Okay.
So we're just
good.
we're looking for other people to join with programming, and I'm the person like the go-between that sort of thing right now.
And Walter, I've been thinking that probably some faculty from Calumet College will be interested in the next forum, if it's going to be on future library.
If you
Museum.
want to talk about, if you want to talk to me about it, you can. Or you can talk to some of the kind of collaborators. So.
So we'll get some, we'll try to get some information out.
And if anybody doesn't mind getting their fingernails dirty or getting a little cold,
Give me, I can
the
contact.
second Saturday of the month we have a work day at
Figure
Angus
it
Grove.
out.
If anybody's interested in.
What's the date on that?
John? Let me see. Last Saturday was the 4th, so at 7. Would be the 11th, I guess.
And what's the event, yeah?
Well, our regular work day at Eggers.
At Eggers, okay.
Yeah.
Restoration.
Restoration. 10 o'clock.
Where do you
10
meet at
o'clock to
Eggers?
1. By the only building there, you know?
Okay.
By the house.
Right.
It used to be the caretaker's house.
We know where that is.
In the Grafton Forest Preserve Police rent-free house.
The Forest Preserve, you said?
Yeah, first place, they used to
they don't-
It's perfectly fine. I lost
Yeah, when I was a kid, we called him Ranger Tom. He